Emotional safety for women. So, really, it's important for women to have all three. I mean, obviously, it's important for those things for men as well, but physical, emotional, and mental safety is huge with women. Like, you'll get a very different woman if she's in survival mode because she's not safe in those areas, as compared to a woman who does feel safe in those areas. She'll naturally be a bit more calm and peaceful and whatever because overall those needs, those sort of points of safety are being met. Now, this is where things can get kind of interesting. And again, it will depend on the dynamic between the man and the woman in terms of relationships, but you can see on the outside, calm, quiet sort of woman, because men do complain, especially certain kinds of men, but complain about women complaining, nagging, you know, ruining their peace. So there is one way you can ensure that she doesn't, and that is by making her scared. So she's too afraid to say anything. That isn't peace. Like, she will be freaking out inside, but too afraid to approach you about it. So again, I guess in the short term, that can feel like you're getting your peace, but you're going to have a woman who's on edge being around you. So I strongly recommend that you don't do that if you're a guy and you're watching. Like I said, it can kind of lean in that direction, especially if you don't yourself focus or work on your issues. Dealing with hers is going to feel, ridiculous. Like, you just aren't going to deal with it. You don't want to deal with her issues, especially if you suppress yours. But I guarantee you, you won't have a good relationship with any woman. It's always going to be a problem if this is your approach. It takes time, but you have to face your own inner demons to then be able to be a safe space for her to face hers as well. Again, she can face hers without you. I'm not saying that it's whatever. But if you're going to be with a woman and, you're making it unsafe, she won't be able to feel safe around you, to be peaceful and harmonious. And in most cases, the reason why women bring up things that they're complaining about, there's a few reasons, but one is they're not happy with certain things that are going on, either how you're treating them or whatever. And she's telling you about it because she cares about you and it hurts. And she's trying to fix it. She's trying to make sure that it doesn't ruin the relationship later because that's that hurtful. So again, if it's something that isn't a big deal and it's a small adjustment on your part, then it's pretty easy to fix as long as you don't make it as an attack. The other thing it can be is incompatibility. And this can be, it doesn't matter, if this is something that you really are and it's different and not compatible to who she really is in this area, it's just a matter of time. At the end of the day, it's going to be tense. It's going to be uncomfortable because you're not compatible. And I think this is something, the first one is definitely a big thing that happens with couples, especially with men and women. But I think the second one is also, I think it's often both for different situations. But again, if you're not compatible overall, it's not really going to matter how much time passes, is it? And it could have just been your relationship was a time period thing. You were meant to learn these couple of things from each other. Maybe you learned them and moved forward. Maybe you didn't, but that's what the purpose of it was, right? And then, of course, if that's what it was, you're going to hit the incompatibility point. Sometimes it's just, you had an attraction for a while. Maybe it was just physical and it wasn't meant to be anything more. And that can be a hard one for people because when you have that kind of electric connection, you want it to keep going. But it might have just been for that time period. Maybe, like I said, oftentimes that kind of stuff is lesson based also. You were meant to learn lessons or go through things together while the excitement and the attraction was there. Once it wanes, there's not much more you can kind of do. And I think this is what happens. And I think it can be tricky, especially if you've got like kids involved and whatever in the relationship. But that's why it's even more important for women to feel safe in all areas, because she has to be able to, again, if it's with kids, take care of the kids, look after things in terms of the emotional side of her and the children. And again, you can and should be both each other's safe space. That's what it's supposed to be. She's, supposed to be there for you to hold space and whatever for your emotions and mental states, and you need to do the same thing for her. And then, of course, men don't typically have to worry as much about the physical safety thing with with women, but women have to think about that with men. She has to kind of think, is he volatile? Is he going to get to the point where when he gets angry, he's going to get violent with me, physically, emotionally, or mentally? If that's anywhere in her mind, it will give her pause. She will be in survival mode, and you won't have a peaceful version of this woman. And that's what I think causes the most issues. Definitely for women and for men in relationships, because, how do you breach that? Because a woman's not going to be, like I said, unless she's completely terrified, which she's still not going to be calm. But you won't get a calm, peaceful woman who makes life easier if that's the case. And at the end of the day, it's the way that you have a calm, peaceful life is the efficiency and the skill that you have when it comes to dealing with conflict. Because conflict's going to tear up anyway. There's nothing you can do. You're going to have conflict in your life. You're going to have conflict in the combination of your lives. There's nothing you can do about that. Human beings have conflict. So it all comes down to how well do you deal with conflict. If you deal with it well, then it's not such a big deal. You will have peace, because it's an easy thing to fix. If a person is kind of like, well, this person's unreasonable in this area, or we don't align, we don't understand each other, whatever. Once you figure that out, there's no point in keep going, because you're speaking different languages, or at least you might as well be, and you want to understand each other's perspective. It's not going to work. So again, you have to kind of determine, is that a deal breaker? Is that something we can't get past? If it's important conversations that you can't have, then no, you can't get past it. And then we have to think about as well, how many of those types of conversations can you not have? How many points of view can you not understand about each other? How much tension does that cause between you in the relationship? Because the more of that you have, the less safe you both feel. And I know sometimes it sort of seems like it falls on the man. I think it's on both. Because you can't meet another person, I don't care if you're male or female, where you haven't met yourself. And again, if you just see things differently, you have different, like in astrology, I can explain it. If you have different points of view, with your Mercury, your third house, if you have these different points of view, and they're like very different to the point where like you do not see things the same way. It doesn't matter how much attraction you have, that is going to make things tense between you. And in those areas, if it happens to be with communication, you're not going to be able to communicate. And that's why there's just some people you literally can't. And the more things that you don't, see the same way, I think a big part of this is, patriarchy and religion, because it sort of teaches people to not listen to their own inner voice, to follow the rules of the scriptures or whatever, rather than their own, autonomy, their own point of view. And when you do that, well, you're going with conditioning rather than who you are and what you see and what you feel. And in terms of religion, well, I guess patriarchy as well. They're both old, outdated, part of a world that doesn't exist anymore and shouldn't have existed in the beginning. But it's what people did. And people didn't have as much information back then. So, you didn't have much access to anything other than like what your parents told you or your pastors or religious whatever or your teachers. That was it. And they were all part of that process too. There wasn't as much known back then. There's been so many more advancements in technology and in information and knowledge and all the rest of it that none of this stuff really, it doesn't even make sense anymore. But again, they're, based on some studies I've seen, they've actually proven that people who tend to really buy into this stuff, they have a higher fear ratio. So They're more likely to go along with it because it's what the collective believes and they don't want to be ostracized. And so it kind of affects their ability to think in a cognitive kind of way. So again, you got to determine that. Whether you're a man or a woman, you have to determine if you're interested in a certain person. You know, if they're kind of heavily involved with these things, or it can be like if it's a man and he's involved with like red pill content or whatever, some sort of misogynistic point of view. And you're as a woman, you're a bit more of a critical thinker, you know, a bit more with the times. There's not going to be many compatible points, even outside of astrology. I mean, there's probably ways, I would say, you can still see it in astrology for sure, but not much you can do about that if that's their point of view. On the flip side, if you're more of a modern, cognitive thinking, open-minded sort of man, and you're dealing with a woman who's indoctrinated into religion and the patriarchy, and those are her beliefs, not much crossover. There's not much you can do. So it's one of those situations where we have to take in a lot of factors to determine who we actually feel emotionally, mentally, or physically safe with, and who we don't. Because if you don't, that is not a basis of a relationship. It just isn't. It's never going to be. So it's these kinds of things we have to take into account and to consider when it comes to dating and who we date, why we date them. What are your points of view? What are your values? What are your deal breakers? And again, if these things don't align, it's going to create for sure emotional instability. Because you don't see things the same way. You don't agree. So yeah, it's worth considering. It's worth paying attention to. And it can be hard in the beginning stages, the sort of honeymoon phase, whatever, because all the dopamine and the chemicals, all of these things sort of flood our systems when we really desire someone, in the beginning. A lot of that, like I said, it's setting up lessons. There's things you need to learn. It can be lessons in self-worth, knowing that this isn't the kind of relationship I want, and now I know. That's what a relationship like that can help. But it's all a matter of how you look at it. If you look at it as to blame, this person took advantage, they were this, they were that. And look, definitely I've noticed with, I can't speak for sure on this because, I don't date women, so I can't be 100% sure, but I don't hear it as often from what I've noticed from what men talk about, but women talk about men performing in the beginning. And, it kind of makes me wonder. It's like they want to, I guess it can depend on what they're doing, but they want to make the best version of them be seen, even though that's not who they are or who they're practicing to be regularly. So it's fake, it's performance. And then she falls for that. That can be a really, really big problem because then she attaches and then realizes that that's not really who you have been practicing to be. And then you switch it up. That's a really, really tricky one because that causes a lot of issues. But again, if men didn't feel they needed to perform in the first place and just were whoever they are in the beginning, if they just were able to be that and maintain it because that's who they are, because they're confident and comfortable in themselves and they've met themselves where they're at, I think a lot of these things would stop, a lot of these issues, because it would become obvious. Women would then go, oh, okay, so this is who you are. I like that or I don't like that. And then she could make the decision and not be tricked. But I'm sure women do that too. I'm sure that it would happen. But I just don't hear it as often, personally. But, there's catfishing and all this sort of stuff. But again, I think it could be difficult if, as a man, you haven't met yourself at a deep level. You're just going to pay attention to looks, aren't you? You're not going to pay attention to her personality or whatever. And I think men should pay attention to that. There's plenty of attractive women. Doesn't mean you should date all of them. Doesn't mean that you should sleep with all of them. Even if you can, you shouldn't. Got to pay attention to that energy exchange. because it affects men and it affects women. And again, it's not permanent. You'll get over it, or you might have permanent changes and grow in ways, but it's not something that's gonna cause some serious detriment. Well, hopefully not. Depends on the situation, I guess. But why put yourself into a situation where it's not really what you want, even if it is an attractive person? That just doesn't make any sense. So we have to think about these things and what makes us feel safe and what makes us feel unsafe.